Right now, somewhere in the world, a dog is sleeping at the feet of a human. It is not afraid. It is not hiding. It is not scanning the shadows for a threat. It has chosen completely on its own terms to be close to you. And if you think that is normal, you have never stopped to ask why. Because it is not normal. Not even close. You are a large predator. You have flat teeth for grinding, yes, but you also have forward-facing eyes, the same eyes that every ambush hunter on this planet shares. Wolves know what forward-facing eyes mean. Crows know. Deer know. Every animal that has ever been hunted by something knows at a cellular level what it means when a creature looks straight at you. It means you are food. So why do they still come close? The answer reaches back more than 15,000 years, and it is stranger and more complicated than any simple story about humans being kind. This is not a story about humans taming animals. It is the story of animals choosing us, and the distinction matters more than you might think. Start with the wolf, not the dog. The wolf. Somewhere in Ice Age Eurasia, a population of wolves began doing something no evolutionary model would have predicted. They started following human hunting groups, not to attack them, not to steal their kills outright, but to shadow them, to wait at the edges, to eat what was left behind. Brian Hare, an evolutionary anthropologist at Duke University, has spent decades studying this moment. His research suggests that the wolves who made this choice were not the boldest or the most aggressive. They were the ones with a slightly lower fear response. The ones who could tolerate being close without triggering their own flight instinct. And that small difference, that tiny internal shift in the threshold between fear and curiosity, changed the entire trajectory of the species. Those wolves survived better. They ate more reliably, and they passed that lower fear threshold onto their offspring. You were not domesticating them. They were domesticating themselves. This process has a name. Researchers call it self-domestication. And once you understand it, you start seeing it everywhere. In the 1950s, a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev began one of the most famous experiments in the history of animal behavior. Working in Siberia, largely in secret because genetics was politically dangerous in the Soviet Union at the time, Belyaev began selectively breeding silver foxes. But he was not selecting for size or fur quality or any physical trait. He was selecting for one thing only: how the fox responded to a human hand. The foxes that did not flee, that did not bite, that showed even a flicker of approach rather than avoidance, those were the ones allowed to breed. That was the entire selection criterion. Within just a few generations, something remarkable happened. The foxes did not just become friendlier, they began to physically change. Their ears became floppier. Their tails curled upward. Their fur developed patches of white. Their faces became rounder, more juvenile looking. They began to whine and wag and seek out human contact in ways their wild ancestors never did. Nobody selected for floppy ears. Nobody was trying to produce a rounder face. Those traits arrived as passengers on the same genetic journey as a reduced fear. Belyaev had stumbled onto something profound. The behavioral and physical markers of domestication are linked at the level of genetics, and the single lever that moves them all is the threshold between trust and terror. Your ancestors did not sit down with a wolf and negotiate a partnership. The negotiation happened invisibly across generations, written not in language but in the slow editing of who survived and who did not. But here is where it gets stranger. Because the fox experiment revealed something that goes beyond domestication, it revealed that the capacity for trust, real cross-species trust, is not a learned behavior. It is a biological trait, one that can appear, disappear, and reappear depending on what the environment rewards. Think about what that means for your own history. For most of human prehistory, the relationship between your ancestors and the animals around them was simple. You hunted them. They fled or fought. The boundary between predator and prey was clear and ancient and enforced by death on both sides. And then, in multiple places and at multiple times, something shifted. Not because humans suddenly became gentler, not because animals suddenly became bolder, but because in certain specific ecological conditions, proximity to humans became against all logic a survival advantage. Consider the raven. In the forests of what is now Europe and North America, ravens began following human hunters millennia ago. A raven cannot crack open a large animal carcass alone, but a human with a blade can. If a raven can locate a kill and wait nearby, it gets access to calories it could not reach otherwise. The ravens that were willing to be close enough to observe human hunting without being close enough to get caught were the ravens that ate better. That survived more winters. That had more offspring. What looks like boldness is actually a survival calculation. And over enough generations, that calculation gets written into the body. Ornithologist Bernd Heinrich, who spent decades studying raven intelligence and behavior in the forests of Maine, observed that ravens seem to have an almost intuitive understanding of human behavior. They watch, they wait, they anticipate, they appear to model what a human is likely to do next. Heinrich argued that this predictive capacity, this ability to read a human almost like a social partner, did not emerge from domestication. It emerged from necessity, from thousands of years of ecological proximity in which understanding a human was a matter of caloric survival. The raven was not your friend, it was running a calculation. And the calculation kept coming up. Stay close. Now look at what happens inside your own brain when you are near an animal that trusts you. Your cortisol levels drop. Your oxytocin rises. Your heart rate slows. The systems in your body that register social belonging, the same systems that respond to the presence of a trusted human companion, activate when an animal chooses to be near you. This is not a metaphor. It is measurable biochemistry. The neurological signature of being trusted by an animal is nearly identical to the neurological signature of being trusted by a person. You are not just charmed by a friendly dog or a tame raven, you are socially recognized, and some part of your nervous system, a part that is very old and very deep, responds to that recognition as though it matters profoundly, which raises a question you may not have considered before. Who is domesticating whom? Because while wolves were slowly losing their fear of humans, something was happening on your side of the equation too. Humans who could read animal behavior had an advantage. Hunters who could predict where the deer would run, who could interpret the sudden silence of birds as a warning, who could recognize the body language of a wolf pack and know whether it was safe to approach, those humans survived at higher rates. They brought back more food. They avoided more danger. They passed their pattern recognition abilities on to their children. The same ecological pressure that was reshaping animal behavior was reshaping human cognition. You became extraordinarily good at reading animals because for hundreds of thousands of years, your life depended on it. And animals, at least the ones whose survival benefited from proximity to you, became better at reading you in return. This was not taming. This was a coevolution. A slow, invisible negotiation conducted not at a table but in the space between species across frozen plains and ancient forest edges over thousands of years of trial and error and death and survival. And at the center of it all was one variable, the threshold between fear and trust. The animals that could lower that threshold slightly, just enough to get close without dying, were the ones that kept eating. The humans who could recognize a lowered threat threshold in an animal and respond to it without triggering a return to fear, those were the ones who built partnerships that changed history. Your dog sleeping at your feet is not an accident. It is the visible endpoint of a process that began long before language, long before cities, long before anything you would recognize as civilization. It began with a wolf choosing to wait at the edge of a fire rather than flee from it. It began with a threshold dropping just slightly, just enough. And the fact that you feel something when that dog chooses to sleep close to you, the fact that it registers as meaningful as connection, as trust given and received, that feeling is not sentimental. It is ancient. It is the echo of a bond that was being formed before your ancestors knew what they were building. Right now, somewhere in the world, a dog is sleeping at the feet of a human. And both of them, across 15,000 years of shared evolutionary history, chose to be exactly there.